It's a utilitarian product. It's not an experiential product. What you want to do is to not just be successful, but you also want to think about how do you become significant in your customer's life. To do this, you can only do it when you unlock the next two levels. The first is when you can predict what it is that your customers want. The only way to do that is if you are so engaged with your customers' needs that you know what they need before you know they need it. So might I get a sense in this room, how many of us here have CRMs in our businesses? An actual CRM. Thank you. He didn't pay me to do this. He's not even aware that I'm going to do it. Won't you stand up, Buck? This is Andrew from Zoho. Anybody in this room, if you're in this room, go and see him. He's got a free trial package on Zoho, which is a CRM for small businesses. You have no excuse to leave this room and still be using Excel, email, Word, or WhatsApp as your CRM. He will give you a free CRM package because I've just told him on stage I've committed it. You will try it for 30 days, and then you will build a business that at the very least, you will know who your contacts are, who your leads are, what are they buying from you, when are they buying it, so that next year you know exactly last year, February, who bought what, and how you can predict your customers' needs. Is that okay? Thank you, buddy. I have committed you without your permission. Is this your missus? Okay? I was about to say, if he loses his job, I'm so sorry. So you want to be able to predict. But the hardest level to get to is the level above this. And here is where you optimize the customer experience so much that your customers become brand ambassadors. Now, often what happens with entrepreneurial businesses is you're delivering experience down here, but your customers are here. And the reason that is because they like you. And so you build a great business and you run it and you make money. How many of us here can't take leave because the customers want to deal with you? This is the problem I'm talking about. Because you have converted them into brand ambassadors because they know that if they come to you, it'll get done. The problem is your organizational architecture is delivering the experience here. So the question becomes, how do you make the business the instrument of value, not you? Said differently, how do you make sure that if you were not in your business for 90 days, 3 months, it would still meet its sales targets, it would still grow, the customers would still be happy? For me, that's my litmus test for entrepreneurs who are ready to grow. Could you take 90 days and the company runs? If you can't, hear what I'm about to say, don't get offended. You are not an entrepreneur, you are self-employed. There is, although subtle, a painful difference. And that painful difference often comes when you go to the bank and ask for a loan. And they have a little note there that says self-employed. Some of you here who've asked for loans know what I'm talking about. You guys are nodding. From the middle here, I'm getting a picture, no sound. I know the look because I get it from my missus when I come home late. Just picture, no sound. Okay, great. If you can build this is what we call a process excellence capability maturity matrix. In our work at the School of Scale, when we work with entrepreneurs to help them scale, one of the things we do is we help them diagnose where they are and then what systems and processes they need to build to put in place. I have to say this because it's so important and I'm cognizant of our time. 15 minutes I have still. Scale is science. Scale is not art. When you watch entrepreneurs who scale businesses, they are not Pablo Picassos. They are not Ronaldos or Messis. They don't have an artistic form or incredible talent. They've learned the science of scale. You know this to be true because have you not noticed how there is an unfair share of certain qualifications in how they are represented in running businesses? You ever notice how many CAs end up as CEOs? How many MBAs end up as CEOs? Why is that? It's because in the learning of the tuition, a part of the tutelage is learning the science of scale. And if anything is science, that means it can be learned. It means there are things that if you did, you'd learn the same thing. You'd learn the same thing. Okay, great. Can I get a quick check-in? How are we doing? We still good? Okay, great. So if you do these things, you then become significant. So that helps you now get a sense of culture. Now let's talk quickly about products. I'm cognizant of our time. Your product has to deliver on all 4 of these things. I mentioned it last year. I didn't get into the detail. We'll get into the detail very quickly. Whatever product you offer in the marketplace has to be relevant. It's got to be responsive to the needs of that customer, convenient to what they're looking for at that point in time, and most importantly, must keep your brand promise. It must. So what does these things mean? First, insofar as we talk about something being convenient, you must have 3 tenets you've got to tick. First, choice. Second, consistency. Third, timeliness. Timeliness is about making sure it's available when the customer needs it. Choice is rationalization. To be clear, there is such a thing as too much choice. Have you ever arrived at the mall, like you go shopping, you get to the mall, and then when you get there, all the parking spots are open? You notice how hard it is to find a parking spot when all the parking spots are open? But you ever go to the mall on like a busy day, and there's no parking spots except the one that needs you to parallel park? And then suddenly you're a master parallel parker. So there are some of us in this room who think that the more product I throw at customers, the better my business. It's actually the inverse. It's a bit like, I'll give you another example. How many of you have ever spent more than 3 minutes scrolling on Netflix looking for the next thing to watch? Yeah, it's too much choice. It's too much choice. So you always want to rationalize the choice, and the science is scant but clear. What the science tells us is you need what is called a triage. You need a product that's so expensive the customer can't afford it, a product that's so cheap the customer thinks they can do better, because that rationalizes them to the product in the middle. So choice, consistency, timeliness. And on consistency, I want to say again, being inconsistently good is worse than being consistently bad. When you're bad, the customer knows what to expect. That's why nobody complains about the queues at home affairs. You go to home affairs, you know what you're going to get. First, you're going to wait for 3 hours. Then eventually when you get to the front of the queue, there's going to be the young lady serving you with purple hair, which is going to confuse you, because somebody of her complexion shouldn't have purple hair. Shouldn't be purple, shouldn't be blonde, shouldn't be red, but Rihanna made things happen. And she's going to look at you, and you can immediately see her tonsils, because as she's looking at you, she's chewing gum, she's saying, "Next!" And so what do? You need to get your passport, you step up to her and say, "Hello, madam." Only time you hear white people call black people madam. Home affairs. Home affairs! Yeah, we got them by the scooter! By the scooter! They did us! They've independence. You're staying here, you'll never be independent. Independent. Independent for who? We're coming here, we don't even need passports. The kid will never be independent. I want to tell you now. First of all, how are you going to build a border? Where? We're coming here. Get ready. We are all in the same shit. I want to be clear. Scat everywhere. Oh, I love my job. So you want to make sure that you're consistently good. Because being consistently bad is actually better than being inconsistently good. Customers only complain when there is an experience oscillation. Great experience, bad experience, great experience, bad experience. Poor experience all the time, they give up. Great experience once, it's a true story. You deliver a great experience once, they get impressed. You deliver it twice, they think you're cool. The third time, they expect it. So consistency is important. Second, be responsive. Be responsive. I was sat thinking the other day, my daughter is 12, turning 32. It's a true story. Her and I were talking on the phone last night, and she was just going on and on. And she said, "Daddy, are you still listening?" "Yeah, my girl, I'm right here." She said, "What did I say?" I said, "You said what you just said when you just said it." That's what you said. That's what you said. So I was sat the other day thinking, I've never won an argument with either my partner or my daughter. Never. Not ever. Like, I've never won an argument. Now, to be clear, I'm a professional speaker. I kind of debate for a living. This is what it is that I do. Winning arguments is built into my DNA. I have never won an argument against any of the women in my life. Not my partner, not my daughter, not my mom, not any of my aunts. My aunts are such good arguers that I have heard them get Oscar Pistorius free when Mary Rue was still fighting. My aunts had won the case for Oscar. But Oscar just had the wrong own lawyers. I'm saying, like, if he had my answer, the men would be free. They are unbelievable, my answer to arguing. Have you ever had somebody so good at arguing that halfway through their argument you think there's something wrong with you? You ever had this? And you start looking back going, actually it's me. No, it's me. And then when you go away, you realize they're the problem. My answer, unbelievable at arguing. So I sat thinking the other day, how come all the women in my life are so good at arguing? Then I realized this. Gentlemen in the room, if you remember nothing else from our time, please remember this. I'm telling you now, I'm about to save a relationship. There's somebody who came into this room and your relationship is on the rocks. I'm about to give you, this is in the Bible. This is Habakkuk 157, chapter 13. What I'm about to give you now is going to change your life. Gents, I worked out women's secret. Hear me out on this. See, when we men argue, the argument starts now. Like if you and I were arguing, the argument starts now. Now, when we argue. Not for women. Some of you are in an argument you don't even know about. The woman in your life starts arguing with you 2 weeks before the argument. She sees you make the intrusion, she archives the facts, she saves the evidence. There are a couple of ladies who was like, why is she telling you this, man? This is so okay. I'm telling you, this is exactly what happens. Did you know, gents, that the women in your life even know how the argument is going to start? Like she knows. She goes, on Thursday when he comes back from the gym, I'm going to say this, then he's going to say this, then I'm going to say this, then I've got it, then he's in trouble, then it's over, then he's finished. It's true. It's true. For those of you who ever did an MBA, remember when you did your decision trees? Women are born with natural decision trees, like they just calculate these things. So the idea here, as I say it in jest, is when you're responsive, here's what's important as entrepreneurs, is to learn to listen with the intent to understand so that you can act. Not listen with the intent to respond.
Yeah.
So sometimes the feedback you're getting is impalatable, but try and understand it. And the best way to test this, I try to do this myself, the best way to test this is when you get the feedback, before you hear the feedback, try and regurgitate the feedback you just heard. So I'll have a client complain about something, and then what I'll say is, so what I'm hearing you to say is, and then I'll say what they just said. Because what I'm trying to do is disconnect my brain from being defensive and seeking solutions, and I just want to park at empathizing with their experience so that I can internalize it. Is that okay? So you listen with the intent to understand. Third, you want to be relevant. Make sure the product you offer your customer is personalized and meaningful. Underline the word personalized. Which is why knowing who your customers are and what they need is so important. So in our organization, we've got these 5 growth pillars. The first growth pillar is growth in growth markets. We've been very clear about the markets we want to grow in. So this year, we're like 400% up in the US, which is our growth markets. The reason is not because we're rocket scientists. It's because we've understood how to personalize our communication and messaging to the market we want to grow in. Scale is science, it's not art. And lastly, insofar as making sure that you're reliable, whatever brand promise you make your customers, you better make sure you keep it. You say cheapest, be that. You say best, be that. You say best service, you better make sure you keep that brand promise. And sometimes keeping the brand promise means it will cost you more in the short term than the long term. But whatever it takes, you make sure you keep that brand promise. I'm cognizant of our time. I'll share this a quick example with you guys. We had a fund, a 300 million rand fund, just after COVID with one of the banks in South Africa. And it was a co-created fund, so we were doing some origination. They had their credit and risk people doing the scoring and then the pricing of the applications we're getting. And if you ever look at our firm, our brand statement is, we exist for the entrepreneur. I should have immediately known that just our brand promise and their brand promise wasn't going to work. Because if you're not aware, marketing doesn't run banks. Credit does. So when you see those banners on banks with the marketing messages, they truly mean for those things to be true. But for most banks, they struggle with those things because credit and risk is credit and risk. And there's a Chinese wall between the product house and the credit and risk that scores the debt. So even your private banker can tell you whatever they want to tell you, but they still go to the same credit and risk who score the credit and the risk the way that they want to score it. And so what we saw was an unbelievable amount of business that we got, entrepreneurs that applied. We then would take these applications, having originated them, having done funding readiness work with these entrepreneurs. You take this work, you take it right to the people that credit and risk, and then they come back and say prime plus 5. And so the disconnect between us was they had a particular brand promise that wasn't consistent with ours. And so we just said, well, then we need to collapse the fund, and you do your own thing and we'll do our own thing. Whatever the brand promises that you've made, you better make sure you live and die by it. Make sure you live and die by it. I'm cognizant of time, so I've got 5 more minutes to go. So your organization's got to make sure you deliver, you save your customers time, resources, and energy. I wish I could spend a little bit more time getting a bit more tactical about how to do this and make sure it's worthwhile. But here's what it is that I want to do. Very quickly, I want to wrap with this. So how do you actually do this? How do you actually do this? First is to question what you see. There are some of us in this room who have sufficient hindsight about our companies. This is the data about the business as we've run it and what we've been through. So in our firm, because of the work that we do, we've worked with, studied, analyzed, and researched a number of the businesses that we work with. In fact, we've done over 1,000 businesses at startup and scale-up stage. And here are the things, and here's what the data tells us. There are 4 things you need to do to make sure you scale your business. The first is you've got to synthesize your operations. And so that's the conversation we had earlier about making sure that the efficiencies, processes running your businesses are the correct efficiencies and processes. Synthesizing operations. From our research, over 50% of the small and medium-sized businesses we work with hadn't even thought about doing this, let alone actually do it. That's the base layer. Once you've done that, then what you want to do is to implement growth drivers. And to be clear, for almost every single business, there are like 3 growth drivers max. Max, 3 growth drivers. So, for instance, in my public speaking business, we know that there is a proportional relationship between the markets my Instagram page grows in and the bookings I get from those markets. Like, it's not rocket science. I've got a young man who runs my social media. He's based out in Europe. I've never met him. He's been running my social media for the past 2 years. Grew my Instagram page from 300 followers to 2.3 million in 18 months. I've never met the kid. But what he's understood is in the markets where we want to grow, what are the things we need to do? And so we only execute on driving the growth drivers. That's why some of you here who might perhaps, by God's grace, follow me on YouTube, you're like, why don't you post those long-form masterclasses anymore? Yeah, because it doesn't drive the growth drivers for our business. So we take the long-form masterclasses, we cut them up into 30-second bits, we post them on the TikTok, and the IG multiplies our incomes 100 times fold. Then the level above that is you want to build for insights. I'm going to spend a bit more time, and I'm cognizant of my time. Please, Aiden, just be a bit patient with me because this is so important. Comrades. When you start a business, you rely on instinct. When you scale a business, you rely on insight. And so the real question is, when do you make the transition from instinct to insight? And we'll come to that in a moment. And then lastly, of these growth drivers, is you have to align incentives. This is so important. You have to align incentives. This, by the way, in particular that last one, is work that continues forever. It never stops. You're constantly going to be aligning incentives. You'll be aligning incentives when you have a 10-man band, a 20-man band, a 50-man band, a 100-man band, a 200-man band. Your role is to ensure that every single part of the business and every single person in every part of the business is aligned on their incentives with the strategy of the business. So it's no point having a strategy that drives for sales growth and then having your services team not have an incentive to drive sales. You've got misaligned incentives. And so your role has to be, how do you align incentives? For me, when we did this research, what really stuck out at me was close to 90% of businesses, small and medium, between 5 and 100 million ZAR, hadn't even thought about aligning incentives. Massive, massive problem. Massive problem. So I'll give you this later, by the way. I'll give it a QR code later. I want to close with this. How do you align incentives? First, make sure everybody knows where they're going. Strategy is critical. So you've got to be clear on what your strategy is for the business. Now, to be clear, how do you know what your strategy is? It's when you know what your strategy is not. So you could ask any of my team members, what is not our strategy? They'll tell you. They'll tell you where we don't want to work, what kind of work we don't want to do, what kind of clients we don't want to service, what kind of invoices we don't want to be billing, what kind of markets we don't want to operate in. Clarity of where not to go gives you clarity of where to go. So in other words, waking up in the morning and saying, by God's grace, I'm going to take what comes, isn't strategy, that's hope. Strategy is having a very specific idea and a scope of what you want to get done. That's the first thing. The second thing you have to do, we talk about this business model. You could write your business model, canvas, blah, blah, fish base. When we work with entrepreneurs, there's 5 things you've got to do very quickly for your business model. First, segment your clients. Now, there's some of us in this room who are giving me that blank face of like, well, this sounds good, but I know this. I'm sure you do, but there's a big difference between what we know and what we do. The real question I would ask those of us who are more seasoned in business and know this is how many of you are doing it? In the work we do with entrepreneurs that help them scale, and I'm going to show you some data from clients in a moment, the scale, the science isn't the rocket science. The doing is the rocket science. You can know all you want. Do you do what you know? So the first thing to do is to segment your market and your customers. The second thing is for every market segment to make sure you know what value you bring them. What's your value proposition? And then the third is to make sure that for that value proposition, you've got a way of reaching them. What's your distribution channel? If, when you leave here today, you just do these 3 things, I'm going to be happy. That's for me, just do these 3 things. With my client segments, what value do I offer? How do I reach them? Then, you're going to reach out to my brother Andrew, and you're going to make sure that you build sufficient, strong, consistent customer relationships. This end of it is making sure you're testing market credibility. The customer relationships, make sure that you manage the value that you create. Now what you need to do is to build a business case. To do this, the first thing you need to know is how am I going to make money from these clients? What revenue streams do I get from each of those market segments? The second is for each of those market segments, how am I going to interact with them? What are your client-facing processes? So please, when we phone your business, we don't want to hear, hey! Have you thought about client experiences and how do you do client-facing processes? And then lastly, how much is all of this going to cost you? Bazalwan is very simple. Now, the what to do is simple, doing it is the hard part. And as your business scales and grows, you're consistently going to need to be doing it at different levels each time. That's hindsight. Second is insight. Then I'll close with this. So we built onto our platform, and I'll share with you guys a QR code because I came with a free gift for you. So when we're done, I'm going to give you a QR code. You scan it, you go in and take what we call our readiness to scale test. Take the test. Once you take the test, you ask you a series of questions. It's going to give you a score on how far you are from scaling your business and your readiness to scale. And for those who score low, it's going to send you an automated email response saying these are the things you need to do to scale your business. So what I wanted to do is to make sure that I leave here and leave you with the what to do. Is that fair? So that's the hindsight. Insight now is around building your business for insight, not for instinct. Now, I get a lot of criticism, so I thought I might bring some evidence. This is an actual client that we work with. And what you're seeing here is the actual client data. Top line over the past 3 years. What do you notice? By the way, these numbers are dollarized if you're not impressed. These are USA, US dollars, not Namibia. Sorry. In the year they joined us in 2021, they made 9.1 million. The next year they went to 15. Last year they did 42. The entrepreneurs who run this business are a couple. The husband doesn't have a matric. The wife is a prayer warrior. He says she wakes him up at 2 in the morning preaching and praying. I dare it. They're not rocket scientists, there's no MBAs, no CAs, nothing like this. They run a simple logistics business. They just implemented the stuff that works and they execute on it. And so one of the things we do on our platform is once you get to onboard your data, it helps you start thinking about your business. For instance, here's a quick question. How many of us in this room as entrepreneurs know the value of the business that we're running? And so on our platform, once you input your data, it will tell you the value. Then it will tell you the 7 most critical decisions every entrepreneur, when you leave here today, you have to make. These are 7 decisions, we make them every day. What price do I want to charge? How much volume do I want to sell? What am I going to do with my cost of sales? How am I going to run my operations? What am I going to do with my working capital cycle, inventory, receivables, and payables? These are the 7 decisions entrepreneurs make on the daily. But what our system does, it allows you to plug in some data, and once you plug in that data, it tells you the impact of that data on your actual business. So now you're not running by instinct, you are running by insight. If I increase my price by 10% and I hold my volume the same, what would happen? Does that make sense? But the most important element is this. If I asked any of you here in the room, what is currently the value of your business? How many of us here know? Most of us don't. We only know if we ever try to sell it, and even then there is a fight between the price and the value. Because you do know those are not the same things.